You made 10 policy pledges for this campaign. Let's see how watertight they are. Can you guarantee that under your leadership, the 2019 Labour commitments to nationalise water, energy, rail, the Royal Mail, they'll all be in Labour's next election manifesto?
I've made that.
It was one of those rare moments in British politics when the mask slipped. During a high-stakes interview with Andrew Neil, a man renowned for his uncompromising style, Keir Starmer found himself cornered. Neil wasn't there for rehearsed talking points or polished spin. He demanded clarity, precision and conviction. But Starmer, visibly uneasy, faltered under pressure. Each question cut deeper, exposing the gaps and contradictions in Labour's message. Neil's persistence was unrelenting, the kind of scrutiny the public rarely sees, and for millions watching, it was a stark reminder of how easily a would-be Prime Minister can be shaken when the spotlight turns uncompromisingly bright. At one point, Neil pressed him directly on his core policy pledges, and that's where things truly began to unravel.
A pledge is not an indication. A pledge is a word, is your word. It's a pledge.
I'm not disputing that. I don't have any problem.
So is it a pledge that these industries will be in your manifesto for nationalisation?
Well, the pledge is 3 lines, Andrew. You're asking me for more detail and I'm giving it to you.
Well, but the fact is the 2016 Trade Union Act, when it comes to cribbing and curtailing union power, is not the key legislation. The key legislation that does that was passed a long time before, and your pledge doesn't mention any of that.
Andrew, how can you say I'm hiding behind a process when it's the Labour Party process? The Labour Party, at the beginning of it...
Because you're hiding behind the process.
No, the Labour Party said...
Why don't you do what the other candidates do and tell... Don't Labour members have a right, as they decide whether to vote for you or not, they want to know where your money's coming from.
Neil began with a simple, direct question, one any serious leader should be able to answer. Where's your campaign money coming from? He asked. But instead of offering transparency, Starmer deflected, burying the response in talk of regulations and administrative procedure. Neil wasn't buying it. Leaning in, he cut through the spin. Other politicians tell us exactly who their donors are. Why can't you? It was a moment that laid bare Starmer's discomfort and hinted at a deeper problem within Labour's promise of accountability.
But I've got people from different parts of the party on my campaign working together, because I know that simply saying unity isn't enough. Everybody's going to say that.
That's not unpalatable. What I'm asking you is a position you're taking that the Corbyn left will find unpalatable.
Well, I'm not particularly interested in finding things that they find palatable or unpalatable.
Starmer continued to sidestep the question, offering only vague references to trade unions and unnamed backers, but no specifics. His reluctance to identify the major financiers behind his campaign raised eyebrows. Neil, refusing to be stonewalled, pressed harder, cutting through the ambiguity. Why the evasion? Why not be transparent? He demanded clarity on who was funding Labour's operation and, more importantly, why Starmer seems so reluctant to say.
You seem to be hiding behind this process. Why won't you simply tell us tonight who are your 5 biggest donors?
Andrew, how can you say I'm hiding behind a process when it's the Labour Party process? The Labour Party, at the beginning of it...
Because you're hiding behind the process.
No, the Labour Party said...
Why don't you do what the other candidates do and tell... Don't Labour members have a right, as they decide whether to vote for you or not, they want to know where your money's coming from?
I've been asked that many times. I've said it's coming from trade unions, from crowdfunding, from individual donations.
Who's your biggest donor?
It's coming from those 3. One of my biggest donors was put up on the website, I think, yesterday.
Right, that's one of the lawyer.
Yes.
That's the law. But who are your 5 biggest donors?
Well,
you haven't announced. You've only announced about £125,000 worth of donations. This campaign costs a lot more than that.
This exchange wasn't just about campaign finance. It was about credibility. Voters have a right to know who funds their leaders because money shapes influence. If Sir Keir Starmer can't answer a simple question about his donors, it raises a far deeper concern. What else is he not telling the public? Neil then broadened the discussion, drawing parallels with France, where the collapse of centrist politics has exposed the failure of technocratic moderation. And that's significant because those same policies form the backbone of Starmer's own platform in Britain. Aggressive net zero targets, leniency on immigration, high taxation, and a focus on metropolitan priorities over the needs of provincial Britain. If that formula falters here, the political pendulum won't swing further, left it's far more likely to shift toward a populist right. Neil's questioning underscored a crucial irony. The man who constantly preaches integrity and transparency didn't sound transparent at all. Instead of clear answers, Starmer offered evasions, and that, Neil suggested, is precisely what turns voters away. Then came the next challenge. You promised to bring key industries back into public ownership and to scrap tuition fees, Neil pressed. Are those still your commitments?
But there's a bigger principle at stake, that Labour Party members who are being asked to vote for you should know who's bankrolling your campaign.
That is why the Labour Party set up those rules.
But you won't tell us.
The Labour Party rules say, carry out the checks, which we have to carry out, and I've got a compliance team doing that. Once you're satisfied the checks are carried out and the donations are proper in order, they go to the parliamentary authorities who put them on the parliamentary website so that everybody can see them. I've been following that procedure. That is exactly the parliamentary rules.
But the other candidates in...
Starmer, once again, avoided a direct answer. Rather than confirming or denying his earlier commitments, he described them merely as Time's pledges, Time's vague aspirations, rather than firm promises, and insisted that more details would be released in due course. But Andrew Neil wasn't buying it. Unimpressed by the evasiveness, he cut straight to the point. A pledge is your promise, he reminded the Labour leader. Will you keep it or not? It was a moment that laid bare a familiar frustration among voters, the growing sense that political pledges, under scrutiny, often dissolve into carefully managed ambiguity.
A pledge is not an indication. A pledge is a word, is your word. It's a pledge.
I'm not disputing that. I don't have any problem.
So is it a pledge that these industries will be in your manifesto for nationalisation?
Yes, it is. The point I'm making to you is the manifesto will have to have a lot more than that.
Of course, I understand
It's not a manifesto.
Well, what about university tuition fees then? Will you remain committed to scrapping them in your first term?
They're all pledges, Andrew, so the answer to these questions is yes.
Neil pointed out that many of Starmer's grand pledges now appear unlikely to ever materialise, a revelation that struck a chord with viewers. It painted a picture of a leader willing to say whatever suits the moment, rather than standing firm on conviction. Neil's line of questioning cut to the heart of political credibility. If a leader abandons their promises so easily, how can the public place their trust in them? Shifting focus, Neil pressed Starmer on another defining challenge: leadership itself. The Labour Party remains fractured, split between loyalists to Jeremy Corbyn and those eager for a new direction. The question was direct and unavoidable. How does Keir Starmer plan to unite a party so deeply at odds with itself?
So university tuition fees being scrapped will be in a Starmer manifesto?
Yes, that's why it's
the
a
next
pledge.
election. OK. Why then doesn't the Labour left trust you?
Well, I'm asking members to vote for me in this election. We will find out on the 4th of April what the members have decided. And I am very happy making my case to our members and obviously letting them decide.
You pledged that you would strengthen workers' rights.
I did.
By repealing the 2016 Trade Union Act. Would you go further and repeal all the union laws passed since Mrs Thatcher?
Well, I would repeal all of those that inhibit collective action. There's been a lot of provisions since then, most of them in trade.
Well, they nearly all do.
As expected, Starmer once again sidestepped the question. He spoke at length about unity, but failed to offer any clear vision of how Times he intended to achieve it. Neil, never one to settle for platitudes, pressed harder, pointing out that unity without a plan is meaningless. But instead of answering directly, Starmer pivoted, clearly wary of alienating either wing of his divided party. It was a cautious move, one that made him appear more focused on keeping everyone happy than on demonstrating the conviction expected of a strong leader. The exchange raised a crucial question. If he struggles to command authority within his own ranks, how can he be trusted to lead the country? Neil drove that point home, reminding viewers that real leadership demands courage, the courage to take a stand, even when it's unpopular. Starmer's vague, carefully measured responses left many wondering whether he truly possesses that strength or whether he's simply too afraid to show it.
Why haven't you declared all the major donors who are funding your leadership campaign?
Well, at the beginning of the campaign, the Labour Party set out the rules that we should all comply with, and they briefed us on it. And they involve doing the necessary checks on any donations, and then passing it to the parliamentary authorities so that they can be published. And I'm following those rules.
But that's process.
That's not process, that's
well,
the
you're
rules.
following the process, but there's a bigger principle at stake, that Labour Party members who are being asked to vote for you should know who's bankrolling your campaign.
Neil then steered the conversation toward one of the country's most pressing issues, housing. Citing a striking statistic, he noted that 5 out of every 7 new homes are being allocated to migrants. Turning to Starmer, he posed the question many across Britain have been asking: how is that fair to local families who've spent years on waiting lists, struggling to find a place to call home?
Well, Gareth Snell was a Labour MP for Stoke. Not anymore. He lost. He says he personally begged you to rethink the referendum policy. But he said he was ignored, in his words, because you thought being popular with the membership was more important to you than holding parliamentary seats. He sees you as a key reason for the defeat in December.
Neil appeared visibly dissatisfied as Starmer's response lacked conviction. The Labour leader spoke in broad terms about building more homes and supporting everyone, but his words rang hollow. Sensing weakness, Neil pressed further, demanding to know why Labour has failed to take meaningful action on such a critical issue. The exchange struck a chord with viewers, particularly those struggling with the housing crisis. For countless families, this isn't an abstract policy debate. It's about fairness, opportunity, and survival. Neil's questioning painted Starmer as a politician full of rhetoric, but short on resolve, someone who talks about helping people, yet hesitates when it's time to act.
Well, Andrew, Gareth has his own view. What I can tell you is that members of Parliament in those seats, Toby Perkins in Chesterfield, Jenny Chapman, who lost her seat in Darlington, Emma Hardy in Hull, are all supporting me in this campaign, and they're all very close to their communities. So I know what Gareth said.
Right.
But look, one of the
others say something different.
Let me finish, because that's a fair challenge to me. No. So what I've been trying to show in my campaign is that I do have the support and the backing of representatives, MPs, those who were MPs, and councillors